President Trump has had a phone call with Canada's Mark Carney, the first since Carney took over as Prime Minister.
Yeah, Trump posted on Truth Social saying the call was very productive and that both he and Carney agree on many things. Trump went on to say that they will be meeting each other in person after Canada's upcoming election.
For more on the phone call, let's bring in CNN's Elena Trines. Elena, do we know what actually came out of this call? We were told that it was productive, but not much more than that.
Yeah, all we have so far is what we have heard from the president, who kind of gave his immediate reaction readout on Truth Social. He said, as you mentioned, that he plans to meet immediately with Prime Minister Carney after their upcoming election, which is scheduled, I should say, exactly 1 month from today. So it could be, a different dynamic that President Donald Trump faces 1 month from today. But he said that they want to talk about then elements of politics, business, and all other factors that will end up being great for both the United States of America and Canada.
We had a very good conversation. Mark called me today at 10 o'clock. We put out a statement. We had a very, very good talk. He's going through an election now, and we'll see what happens. But we have Liberation Day, as you know, on April 2nd, and I'm not referring to Canada, but many countries have taken advantage of us, the likes of which nobody even thought was possible for many, many decades, And, that has to stop. We're going to end up with a very good relationship with Canada and a lot of the other countries. Some we probably won't. It won't be so pleasant.
One thing I also took away is that this call actually happened 14 days after Carney was sworn into office. That is kind of unusual. Normally, you'd have the President of the United States calling one of its strongest allies like Canada far sooner than that. So interesting that it took so long for these two to talk. But the fact that he said it was very productive, that they agree on many things, is definitely perhaps more friendly and favorable to Canada than what we've seen the president use with his language in the past.
Donald Trump is speaking for the first time with the new Prime Minister, Mark Carney. This is what Mark Carney said just yesterday about the Canadian relationship with the United States.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over.
The relationship is over. Wow. Okay, so then today, Trump had this conversation with Carney for the first time since Carney became the prime minister. He said in that post that they had a productive call. But this is the interesting thing here. He actually called him Prime Minister, Mark Carney. He had been calling Justin Trudeau, his predecessor, the governor, 51st state, as in 51st state. I don't want to read too much into that because who knows what Trump will say in the next post or when he speaks publicly. But what is your reaction to that?
Yeah, again, I don't know how much I'd read into that, given that almost every single time the president talks about Canada now, he says it only makes sense as the 51st state. He repeatedly calls it the 51st state. I mean, maybe he's deciding to be a little bit more careful since Carney is the new PM. But look, Carney, I think, is coming out aggressively, whether it's in that statement that you played or previously. They've ran ads in Canada. They're running actually billboard ads, I believe, in the United States saying tariffs are a tax, trying to appeal to the American public. The Canadian government is saying, Americans, this is not a good thing to be doing, which is to be antagonizing an ally with tariffs and to just continually be antagonizing us also by calling us the 51st state. So I think you're seeing this new playbook from someone like Carney, who is saying we're not going to take this line down.
Which is different. Just note, Carney's domestic politics here, right? He's called for an election. The entire landscape in this election, he became prime minister by getting elected leader of his party, obviously, after Trudeau's departure, but he's now running to have his party maintain a majority status and maintain his premiership. And right now, the context of the election has totally changed because of everything you just went through that Donald Trump has done antagonistically towards Canada. It has made sort of running against Trump a more popular position and a central theme in this election. And so Carney is, what you heard yesterday, that's not just about setting up U.S.-Canada relations or the Trump relationship. That's also playing to the home crowd.
Republicans were for a while saying Trump is doing this for leverage. He's being unpredictable. But now you have someone who's not just at the table saying we're going to work for better sort of deal agreements. They're saying we're done with you. And that is not a position that Republicans want to be. And that's where you're also seeing them shift. they have been expressing more doubts. And privately, that's something that I hear a lot more, that they have concerns about what it will mean for certain constituents and businesses that they're starting to hear from.
Joining us now for some analysis, the former Premier of Quebec, Jean Charest. He's also the former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada. Premier, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, do you agree with Prime Minister Carney that the long-standing, very old, distinguished U.S.-Canadian relationship is now over?
We continue to hear the same messages coming out of the Trump administration, Wolf, and how could we not come to that conclusion? And sadly, because the relationship between both our countries has been historically exceptional. Both countries are lucky to be born and live in this neighborhood of the world, frankly. If you look around, from a trade perspective, it's been an exceptional relationship, but it's changed. And we have just come to the conclusion that it's changed forever. And now we're looking ahead. We want to continue to work. And by the way, the American people, our neighbors and friends, we love them very dearly. There's a difference between that and the political issues we have. So we want to work with our American neighbors. I think we have to look at a comprehensive trade and security agreement in the future. But Canada's going to have to rethink its economy and rethink how we operate in this new political environment with the United States.
Yeah, it's a whole new world. For those of us who grew up along the Canadian border, I'm from Buffalo in Western New York, it's hard for me to believe that this is even going on, given the longstanding, very close friendship and alliance between the U.S. and Canada. President Trump and Prime Minister are speaking today. How much do you think this conversation will or will not improve the very bad moment in U.S.-Canada relations right now?
Well, it's an opportunity to have a better understanding of what President Trump has in mind. I mean, this idea of just throwing out there a 25% tariff in the automotive industry. I mean, our whole industry has been integrated on the automotive side, Wolf, since 1965. And so there's a whole logic around how the industry is organized. And trying to change that would cost billions of dollars to redo the supply chains that are very effective for both sides of the border and effective for consumers. Now, Mark Carney is in the middle of, Prime Minister Carney is in the middle of a federal election campaign to be held on the 28th of April. He is seeking a mandate, and he'll be seeking a mandate to be able to negotiate with President Trump and our American neighbor, the new administration. And so that has to be part of the conversation. And if that's the case, it would sort of make sense for the American administration to hold back on making decisions that are going to be upsetting and creating some chaos in our supply chains until that election campaign happens.
You know, it was interesting, Premier, hours before the Prime Minister's comments yesterday, President Trump issued a warning on social media. Let me read it to you. If the European Union works with Canada in order to do economic harm to the USA, large-scale tariffs, far larger than currently planned, will be placed on them, both in order to protect the best friend that each of those countries has ever had. How seriously are you taking this threat?
Well, we take seriously what President Trump says. By the way, on a number of issues, we get it, Wolf. Canadians know that there's a number of issues that the president wants to address, and we want to be helpful in that regard. We want to help him be able to accomplish what he has on his plate, on his agenda. Now, we're a sovereign and independent country. And if he's putting tariffs, he can't, at the end of the day, you can't tell other countries how to react if you're actually dragging them into this fight. And we did not ask for this fight, Wolf, to be very clear. Again, the American people, I hope they all understand that. We're being dragged into this because President Trump has decided so. But he can't, on the other hand, decide what either us as Canadians or Europeans do in response, which will be a legitimate response to his tariff policies.
And very quickly, Premier, before I let you go, how do you react when you hear President Trump refer to Canada as potentially America's 51st state, and he starts calling the Premier, the Prime Minister of Canada, governor?
Well, we all thought initially that this was just, a friendly jibe at Canada. Obviously, it's not, and it's disturbing. And if you read between the lines, it's as though he's saying to Canada, "What's really wrong with you is the fact that you exist, and I object to the fact you exist, and you should not." And think for a moment, if you were an American, of how disturbing such a statement would be, to say you don't exist as a country and then question the borders. We've seen this movie before. They never end well. And hopefully with a new prime minister, with Mark Carney as the new prime minister, that this tone will change and that we'll get to a serious, friendly discussion on the fundamental issues that affect both countries and continue to work together. That's our hope.